So you can tell just how far in advance I tend to record these things that I'm only just now starting to wear the new uniform for the Voyager stuff. Yes, for those of you paying attention with the whole uniform question, after receiving some comments on the matter and some feedback on the matter, I spent a long time, and I mean like weeks and weeks and weeks, consulting and concepting and basically trying to figure out what I'll be wearing for future features. And if you watch some of my other stuff, you've probably noticed I've already started wearing this, especially for my streams. The idea is that I'll be wearing this outfit for everything except for the main Friday Ruminations, and then I'll be wearing basically the inverse for the main Friday Ruminations, which keeps track of how I've been doing the fonts too. You know, white on black versus black on white. So, this is the new outfit. Hope you like it, and if you don't, well, that's tough. At this point, moving on. So this is what we'll be wearing for Babylon 5. Well, actually, no, I'm going to be something slightly different for Babylon 5, but this is what I'll be wearing for TNG and DS9 going in the future. Now, we got all that out of the way. Let's look at Friendship 1. So, first and foremost, let me just say that this feels like it's... I still like this episode. You know, Season 7 continues to be good. But I have to say, this is probably one of the less good episodes of Season 7 so far. It feels like it's like reaching for something and then, no, can't quite make it there. And that feeling goes through a lot of it. I feel a lot of why I like this episode is because of Mike Vihar, who's the gentleman who directs it. He's done a lot of other really good directing jobs. He's the guy who directed The Muse, for example. I praised his directing previously. He does good stuff, and he manages to pull some different takes on scenes that kind of add to the flavor of them, and I like that. Also, I want to give huge praise to the effects department and the art department for this episode, because the planet is really well done, especially for Star Trek. And I know that sounds like an insult, and it kind of is, but I mean, this is Star Trek. We're used to either having planet soundstage or a single matte painting. And this, they really went above and beyond for the planet on this one, and so I just want to give them huge props. It actually sold the devastating nature of the planet and how horrible it was, and they did really good job with the set design, both interior and exterior, so huge props to those groups. I honestly feel that kind of helps elevate my impression of the episode, because I could actually feel like this was this horrible, depraved, decadent, or not decadent, wrong word, desiccated planet, and that otherwise might have fallen flat if not for the inclusion thereof. Let's just start at the top and work our way down. First of all, the teaser, I feel, should have either gone more in one direction to make it more innocent, or more in another direction to make it more ominous. As is, it's just kind of, huh? Like, why is this the teaser? It's short, but it's like, huh? The reason I say that is, if it was more innocent, it would pique our interest, because we would immediately put two and two together. Oh! An old probe that we launched forever ago is reaching a civilization, and because this is Voyager we're watching, we have enough of a brain to recognize that we're going to encounter that civilization as Voyager. Okay, interest raised. Or make it more ominous. Oh, it's a probe. Oh god, everything's going horrible. What do we do? You know. Instead it was just kind of... There's a scene where one of the Admirals heaps praise upon Janeway. If you're paying attention, this is actually the third Admiral to do so throughout the course of the show. I point that out because you can't tell me there's no politics in Starfleet, because we've demonstrably seen politics in Starfleet many, many times. It may be different than our politics in many ways, but it's still politics. I point that out because this is the first time that really clicked with me. And I was like, huh. As it ever tends to be, when it comes to becoming a part of a clique, even if it's a clique that happens to be a upper echelon of a military chain of command, it usually devolves down to who you know. I'm sure many people who are listening to this right now can understand from personal experience what it's like to not know the right people and therefore not get positions or jobs or to be involved with certain groups that you probably should have been. That's happened to me at least once that I can think of. Twitch! Oh, excuse me. Don't know what was going on there. But I bring this up because it kind of makes the whole Janeway becoming an admiral thing make a little bit more sense. Because she knows the admirals, and they know her. Anyways, I will also say, by the way, just while we're on the subject, it always made more sense for Janeway to become an admiral than basically any of the other Starfleet captains. Picard, he doesn't want to be an admiral. He has always rejected that. Kirk, ugh, that was pretty much the entire character arc of all of the Star Trek movies from 1 to 6, or rather from 1 to 4 and then 6, was that Kirk should stay in command of the Enterprise, right? You know, Cisco, he's a frontline leader. He only took the promotion to captain because he could keep his job in being a frontline leader while doing so. And Archer, well, even if we take later Archer, when he's actually a good character and actually fleshed out and they're doing some things with him, that Archer is an explorer. He wants to be out there doing things. He doesn't want to be sitting in stuffy meeting halls. He hates the idea of going back and giving speeches and all that stuff. No, the only Starfleet captain we've ever had who really actually fits the Admiralty position is Janeway. And I find that very funny in its own right. That being said, ironically, I think just about all of them would make good admirals, even if they didn't want to be them, but I digress. Moving on. Speaking of Enterprise, I actually didn't intend this parallel, because that was just a segue I just did that wasn't in my notes, but my very next note is about Enterprise, specifically Season 3 and 4 of Enterprise. One of the things they did really well in the later seasons of Enterprise, when it actually started being a show, was that they emphasized humanity's naivete. It's a storyline I've actually always liked. In fact, my own Imperium storyline has the exact same arc in the beginning parts of it. You know, we reach out to the stars, and the first people we encounter are friendly. Yes! Oh, and I actually have a term for that. I call that the Vulcan moment. Because that's the moment at which you encounter another race who is like-minded and interested in cooperation and peaceful coexistence, and it just leads to this golden era of awesome, right? There's another moment that happens right after that. That's the wake-up moment. That's when you encounter a race that's just here to crush you like a bug. Now, Enterprise had that with the whole Season 3 thing. I'm not going to spoil too much, just on the off chance you haven't seen that. But that's kind of what Season 3 was about, the wake-up moment. Oh, crap, you know, because we were so naive. This episode actually kind of touches on it. The idea, they even mentioned this multiple times throughout the episode. We reached out to the stars without even the tiniest idea of what we were doing or how we're doing it. This was before the Prime Directive. This was before Starfleet. This was just humans and Vulcans who were like, dude, there's aliens, and they're awesome, because we'd encountered the Vulcans. So yes, reach out to the stars! Not even thinking a little bit about the consequences of what they might be doing. Now, of course, we know what actually... I mentioned that because I feel in many ways that this episode provided something of an impetus for what would eventually become Enterprise, since that is basically the era in which Enterprise happens. Before I go into the elephant in the room, which actually I don't want to discuss if I'm being honest, let's talk about Carrie. Our good friend Carrie. For those of you who don't remember, Carrie has been around since Season 1. This is Season 7. And yet if you look up all the episodes he's been in, it's a small number. I've never been able to figure out why. If anybody knows, please feel free to share. Because Carrie is just there, and then they just kind of sweep him under the rug, and it's like, okay, well, you just kind of assume that he's not going to be a guest star anymore. I mean, it's not like... They've done that with many different recurring guest stars in the past. I mean, look what happened to... oh, God, I can't even think. It was Vorik, I want to say. The Vulcan. Jerry Taylor's son. So, you know, it wouldn't be a big deal. But then the weird thing is, he kept coming back. And it was almost always in time-displaced episodes. It's just all of a sudden, hey, it's Carrie again, except it's in the past. Or, hey, it's Carrie again, except it's a different dimension. It's like, what the heck? And so this is finally, for the first time in forever, Carrie is back and actually here in the present, and it's really him. And this is the real timeline, the prime timeline, and blah, blah, blah. And they do it to kill him. Why? I've never been able to figure that out. It feels like such an afterthought. It feels like they had the beginnings of an idea there and brought back a recurring character to kill him to emphasize the cost of exploration. But then they never did anything with that other than have a little coda at the end with Janeway, which I'm saving for the very end of this rumination. I'm going to bring this up then, but I just want to say that, in my opinion, Q Who made 16 nameless people feel more relevant than Carrie, a character we've seen multiple times, did in this episode. Not sure why they really did that with this. And the best part is, with the exception of, I think, 2 little additional side scenes, it's not even brought up again. It's the Tasha Yar thing all over again. Ah, they're dead. Okay, on with the episode. You know. And I think I'm sorry. I want to talk about that more. If you'll forgive me, this isn't in my notes. This is just something I want to rant about. Forgive me. I understand the mentality from a writer's perspective of wanting to really have shock value behind an impact. Now, I have said this time and time again, and I've made the mistake just like every writer has. If you do something to be shocking, it tends to be less shocking. If you do something that has some great significance, some great impact on the story, that is something that you couldn't even imagine happening otherwise, that tends to be a little more shocking. It's the whole killing Spock thing. Nicholas Meyer famously said, paraphrased, you can't kill Spock, and Nicholas Meyer's response to that was, yes, you can. You just have to make sure that it grows naturally from the themes of the work so that you don't see it happening until it's on you. That was shocking. Just, oh my God, they're killing Spock. That had impact, right? I mention this because both Tasha Yar and Carrie feel like, oh, we need to have impact. We need to make this death matter. Quick, make it a named character. All right, they're dead. Okay, we're good. It doesn't flow naturally from the series of events. It doesn't have anything to do with the theme of what's going on. In fact, in both cases, Tasha Yar, and trust me, I'll be talking about that when we get to Skin of Evil, and Carrie, there's nothing relevant to that death to what's happening on screen. And actually, in this case, specifically, with Carrie in Friendship 1, it's made even worse by the fact that it's an artificial drama threat anyways. I'll discuss that more in a minute, because that's kind of an unrelated topic. But why even do this? Why have Carrie here, and why have Carrie die for what amounts to no reason other than, oh... Also, apparently you can inoculate against radiation. I just feel like pointing that out. I know that Star Trek science is basically magic, but every time I hear that, I just go, oh, wow. You can inoculate against radiation. Wow. Anyways, so let's talk about the thing that I don't want to talk about. Yes, I'm typing on my phone. I'm talking to Lore Mom. Let's talk about the Prime Directive. I don't even know where to start with this. I'm actually thinking... Give me just a second. See, the problem is... I want to give props to the episode for not really making this a Prime Directive episode, because it would have been easy to do so. I actually feel like this originally started as a Prime Directive episode, and you know what I mean by that, right? There's so many episodes where just suddenly the Prime Directive becomes inviolate, like all of a sudden you must follow the Prime Directive, and the episode is very carefully constructed to show why interfering with lesser cultures is wrong, and that feels like what there's going on here, and yet that's not what they do with it. But I mentioned the Prime Directive because I have heard many fans refer to this episode when defending the Prime Directive. You can't know the negative consequences of your actions. And they use this because this is, again, kind of a fairly carefully constructed thing. We sent out a probe with tons of info, and it landed on this planet, and they got this technology they weren't ready for, and they used the technology they weren't ready for, and they had a massive devastation, and their planet was just destroyed, and millions dead. We basically brought a civilization to its knees because we interfered with a lesser race. And I keep using the word lesser with a little bit of acerbic-ness behind it, because the whole idea is that they're less technologically developed, and the Prime Directive has a little bit of snootiness about it anyways, but then again, you guys know that I am very anti-Prime Directive. Moving on. Should we have more carefully considered sending the probe out into space? Yeah, absolutely. Should we have not sent the probe out into space? That's a little more careful of a question to ask. Because the problem is, the only argument that is being brought up is you can't know the negative consequences of your actions. I mention that because you also can't know the positive consequences of your actions. In fact, you can't know the consequences of your actions. Period. So, why exactly is it that that is the argument? The argument is basically, we don't know the future, therefore we shouldn't do things. I hate to be so derogatory about this, but I find that to be an absolutely ridiculous argument. And I have said so to many people's face. It's like, no, that doesn't work that way. You're saying that just because we don't know what might happen, we shouldn't do things. And they're like, no, we shouldn't do these specific things. And then I respond, well, why limit it to that? You don't know the negative consequence of getting in your car and driving to work today. You don't know the negative consequence of what happens if you decide to buy this new thing or try out this new thing or go visit this people or go on this vacation. And if you're a leader of men, you don't know the negative consequences of leading your people here or exploring this planet. Should we stop exploring because of the possibility of negative consequences? Now, it's funny I bring that up, because that's kind of one of the things the episode says. And this is the second time I've brought that up, and I wanted to talk about it last. So I'm just going to save that. Let's just move that to the end. Let's talk about the episode proper. I still haven't actually talked about the episode proper. So, first of all, there's a scene which kind of makes me roll my eyes just a little bit. So, first of all, Tom talks B'Elanna out of going down to the planet. B'Elanna wants to do something. Duh. There's this great bit where Tom flat out says, no, of course you're not an invalid. But that's a toxic atmosphere with a bajillion isorems of made-up numbers of lots of radiation. You probably shouldn't be going down there when you're 6 months pregnant. This is proven to be fairly accurately true in the fact that the woman has had multiple stillbirths as a result of living in filth and horror for however long. Funny fact, they never say how long, by the way. They never say how long it's been. Has this been one generation of radiation? Have there been multiple generations living under this? Or is this a recent thing? They never actually say. I personally like to think that most of these people who are there were actually alive when the disaster happened, so basically within a generation. I like to say that because that makes freaking sense. I mean, to be blunt, these people aren't going to live particularly long under these circumstances with little food and little water and constantly dying because of radiation, and toxic fumes. But I digress. But I bring that up because that means it's very likely that there've probably been no, or actually say very, very, very few children born under the circumstance. In fact, we only see one. We got kind of a Krogan situation going on here. 1 in a bagrillion actually is born, and that kind of makes sense, if I'm being blunt, given the horrific circumstances. Which all brings it back to the whole concept where there's this conversation back and forth between Carrie and Tom. Now, I've heard some people complain about that, because it's like, oh, men are just being stupid protective. I don't think it's called being stupid protective when you don't want your very pregnant wife to go on a planet with a horrifically dangerous atmosphere, especially since, and this is hindsight, but if she had gone down, they would have taken off her suit, and she would have started breathing in the toxic, horrific air. That's great for the baby right there. However, I'm willing to give this a pass. I know some people rant at that. I don't really see it as such, because what I'm seeing is they're using that as a way to tie in Tom Paris's connection to random alien woman. I don't know her name. I'm not even sure they gave her name. And her son. Because Tom's father instincts just kick into overdrive on the planet. And he reaches out to this woman multiple times, trying to take care of her and trying to have that mutual bond of being a parent, or an expecting parent, actually, which is even better because neither of them know anything about actually being a parent. One because she hasn't been born yet, and one because of horrific reasons. And so Tom then is actually therefore motivated to go out of his way to help her in a way that he probably shouldn't be, considering these people just murdered one of his comrades. Although, again, the Carrie thing isn't really brought up, so maybe that didn't actually exist. Maybe it's like, all right, go help this woman. Okay, I like how Chakotay makes the right call again, by the way. Chakotay gets back to the ship. They beat down the scientist, and they get the hell out of Dodge. And that is exactly the correct call to make there. I mention that because that is, once again, the commander speaking, and it's kind of fairly consistent with Chakotay's character, such as it is. And it's one of those things that makes me remember why Harry is not actually command material, because Harry says, no, we got to stay and help the other people. No, that's not going to help anybody, Harry. You need to leave. It is unfortunate that you have to leave people behind, but if you don't, things will be worse. So then they want off planet. That's one of the more interesting hostage demands I've ever heard. Get us off planet. It's almost utterly non-enforceable, which I find hilarious. Because he can't possibly, like B'Elanna even brings this up. Is he going to keep Tom and the crew hostage for 3 goddamn years while they relocate them? I mean, how is he going to maintain situation? Keeping in mind, as he is later portrayed, he is irrational to the point of insane, and actually is mistrustful to the point of trying to ruin everything, constantly. So what does he think he's getting out of this? The only possible consistent presentation of his character is that he is literally insane, and he isn't actually thinking this through. Get me off this planet. I want a plane in an airport, and it's that thing all over again. He's not thinking. And that brings me to the thing I hate most about this episode. Varen. That's the irrational guy. Varen is irrational, and Varen kills a hostage. Now, I'm fast-forwarding a little bit in the episode, but I mentioned this. He kills Carrie. First of all, as I think I've already complained about, Carrie and his death has nothing to do with anything. There's no significance. There's no thematic point. It doesn't have anything to do with any of the characters. It doesn't really add anything to any scenes. The only time it's even brought up is Janeway says, "No, I refuse to help these people who killed Carrie." And of course, in the coda. There's the only 2 times it's brought up. Why does he kill Carrie? Let me give you a better question. Why does he exist at all? I know this sounds weird, because I know the answer to my own question. The reason Varen exists is because we need a threat of the week. Let me make this clear. Someone like Varen probably should and would exist in an environment like this. Someone who has basically gone insane, but is sufficiently cognizant in order to actually maintain control and some symbol of survival for the people who are the survivors, right? He himself says, "I kept you alive," right? So, okay. But for the structure of an episode of television, that's not the purpose he serves. He's not there because he should be there. He's not there because it makes sense for him to be there. He is there because they need a villain of the week. They need a threat of the week. They need to have action sequences. They need to have something threatening the crew and threatening the ship. I know this sounds weird because I actually kind of like a decent amount of action in my Star Trek, but why not remove that entirely? I know I'm not doing the lore runner version of Voyager anymore, but why not just absolutely extract Varen and his whole thing entirely from the episode? Why not just make it so that this is an episode about consequences? This is an episode about naivete. This is an episode about trust. This is an episode about trying to act and do and accomplish based on what is, not what might be. Again, I'm jumping ahead of my notes drastically here, but just forgive me. This right here is, for me, why this episode is still good, why I still enjoy it. Because the whole point of the episode is that they keep trying to bring up this "we did this accidentally" thing, but they don't really do it as a result of blame. Like, they don't say it's our fault. They don't try to lay the blame on humanity for sending this out. But what they do is say, we should take responsibility for what we have done. We made this choice. Now, whether it was the right or the wrong choice doesn't matter anymore. We made it. Let's choose now to try and fix it. Let's try to help these people now. Let's try to assist these people now. And there's this actually great scene where Tom and Neelix argue for that, which then turns into a terrible scene very quickly because Janeway's response is what I just mentioned. She gives a paltry, "we shouldn't help these people because they murdered Carrie." Which, by the way, that's her only objection, and then that objection goes out the window and she's an ardent supporter just immediately after that. And it is Tom who points out the obvious flaw in her argument. No, a person murdered Carrie. Choices, consequences, actions. That's what the core of this episode is all about, and the meat of it that I pull from it that I rather enjoy. There's this bit where they talk about, we should just try to, maybe you're trying to conquer our planet. Maybe you're trying to set up a situation, and you can deal with radiation, so obviously you're trying to conquer our planet, right? Now, obviously that's incredibly illogical, and yet it is the illogic that is faced with a situation where they don't have enough information to understand. They don't get it. They can't get it. All they can look at is a situation where it's like, well, okay, Conquest? Maybe that's why they did it? No. Which is wild speculating at this point. Because what humanity did was without thought of consequence. And what humanity is doing is with thought of consequence. What I say humanity, it's actually the Federation. I mean, there's multiple races involved. But, what they're trying to do is with thought of consequence. Sorry. I'm going to... Let's get back to the episode. So then Tom, of course, fatherly instincts, helps the baby. It is a nice tie-in earlier with the whole him and B'Elanna thing. Janeway, there's a scene where Janeway offers food and medicine for a hostage, which is a terrible move, because at that point you're saying, all right, you have power over me. You don't do that. And then Varen kills the hostage. Now, as I think I've already said, dumb scene, threat of the week, irrational, blah, blah, blah. What she should have done is she should have offered help without a hook attached. Now, I know that sounds weird. In fact, that is actually arguably the stupid thing to do. But it is the idealistic thing to do. It is the Federation thing to do. In fact, it's what they actually do later, and that's what actually ends up winning over the people. Tom helps their baby, takes him up to the ship, brings him back down. With no offer of aid, without being coerced, he helps her. Without being coerced, without having any hostages, they offer to help them with the planet, and they do. They demonstrate through action that trust barrier that has to be broken. They keep talking about, oh, we can't trust you, we can't trust you. And that the episode makes no effort to try and establish why that really is, why they have this trust issue, even though it's logical why it's there. And then they go... Janeway makes no effort to try and bypass that trust issue. You're suffering and hurt? All right, let me send down some medical supplies. Oh? What do you want for it? A hostage? No. Think about it. Later on, there's a scene where it good directing. It's cutting back and forth between them, charging in and then being captured, that whole thing, right? The fights out and outside. Good stuff. And then the baby being saved. But I mention this because I honestly feel like that scene might have worked better if the hostage situation had been downplayed more. Like, too much time, in my opinion, was spent on the hostage situation and on Varen in particular for the whole threat of the week angle. I do have to give them praise, by the way, for the fact that their hostage rescue was very intelligent. It was exactly what they should have done. Oh no, I've been captured by this person that can't be identified as one of your allies, who also happens to be the doctor who can do this. That was smart. It was good job. Good job on their part. But why not have the hostage situation resolved in, the second act rather than the third? Because then it could have been so much more about now you have no hostages. We're still here to help you, though. Huh? You could still have a character like Varen in that case, because then he would be faced with something he can't comprehend. But no, you're the enemy! Uh-huh. Here's your child back. Just... And I hate to say this because I tend to be a rather cynical, I enjoy dark stories, I enjoy serious stories, DS9's my favorite Star Trek, etc. But it would be wonderfully idealistic and in keeping with Star Trek's overall tone, wouldn't it? We did something out of naivete. It indirectly caused you to have this consequence. Okay? We're now going to help you. We have no reason to, other than the fact that we want to. Because, again, the episode does do one thing smart. It doesn't lay guilt on us, on the Federation for what happened. It instead presents this as a situation of consequence, like I was talking about earlier. So, okay, we will help you. What do you get out of it? Nothing. This is not about making up for it. This is not about repaying an old debt of sins of the fathers or anything like that. This is not because you have something to offer us as member citizens or as an outpost or resources or trade. No, we're just here to help you because we're the Federation, goddammit. That is what we do. I would have liked that instead of threat of the week, but... Let's talk about the coda. I've been circling the coda thing too long. I actually had a long discussion once with a friend of mine about this coda. Just this coda. Janeway flat out... Chakotay is the one who says, sometimes there is a cost in human lives for taking actions like exploration. And her response is basically, it's not worth it. Whether it be millions or one. You know, the millions who died on the planet or the one who died on the show. Trying to add some extra gravitas to it. Now, let me go ahead and start by saying that I don't think that's inconsistent with Janeway's character. Especially as Kate Mulgrew has been interpreting and portraying Janeway through much of like the latter half of Voyager. This is a Janeway who has been broken. This is a Janeway who has fallen. She is. I've said this so many times. A character faces traumatic experience. This is actually true in real life too. You face something horrible and traumatic. You have one of two things happens, generically speaking. Either you rise up and become stronger and more and better. You come out of it with the best of yourself, or you are crushed beneath it and you come out of it with the worst of yourself. And Janeway has very clearly in the latter category. This is a woman who has lost all her idealism, who has lost her hope, who has lost her belief that this is worth it. And as much as that is in character for Janeway, and I do kind of like the idea of exploring that, it should have been done more deliberately. It's very clear that the makers of Voyager didn't really want that arc for her. So if they had done a deliberate arc of Janeway being crushed beneath this to show another side of Starfleet, I would have liked that. But B, that also flies directly in the face of the rest of Star Trek, which tends to boil down to the concept of it's hard, but it's worth it. I know Sci-Fi Debris pointed this out too. Forgive me. Someone asked why I keep bringing up Sci-Fi Debris. It's just because I watch his stuff and I have a good memory. That's the only reason. It's not any direct thing. I mean, that man, he makes way more money than I do, and he doesn't even know I exist. But he brought up this comparison too, and it's the exact same comparison I wanted to bring up because it's one of my favorite quotes in Star Trek, actually. Paraphrased, if you can't take a bloody nose, you should stay back home where you belong. There are amazing things, delights and wonders to satiate the senses, both subtle and gross. But it's not for the timid. I like the idea of Janeway being a deliberate contrast to that, showcasing someone who wasn't able to rise up in the face of that. In fact, they do that exact same character arc, intentionally this time, with Archer in Season 3 of Enterprise. But as it's presented, which is clearly an unintended thing, all we have is a woman who is being crushed by her own uncertainty and anxiety and should not be in command. Maybe an admiral. I think she'd be a good admiral. Well, I don't know if she'd be a good admiral, but she should be an admiral. Kick her upstairs. That's how that goes. I'll see you next week, guys.